This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
And I'm Sam Abul-Samad from Navigant Research.
And I'm Rebecca Linland from Rebecca Drives.
So welcome back after the holiday celebration. However you celebrated, we're back. Sleeping off the post-holiday hangover and whatever else happened. Reading a good book, whatever. So welcome. I've still got the same cars, so I can't really talk about the CRV touring much more. I think I said all I needed to say about it last week. And so let's just roll into what you folks are driving. And Rebecca, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. You have the Lexus LX570, and that's all interesting. And we'll talk about that. But I want to know your thoughts about the 2019 Ram 1500 Hemi limited e-torque giant truck that you can't park anywhere. How does it fit in your driveway?
It was great. I have plenty
big.
of space in my driveways. Actually, I have two driveways. My house sits up on a hill, so I have a lower driveway and an upper driveway.
It's like the 50s. Like, how many TVs do you have? You have two TVs? Nobody has two TVs.
I have a lot of TVs.
We've actually got 4 TVs in this house right now, even though there's only 2 of us living here.
Well,
one is semi-retired.
One of the people living there, or the TV?
The TV.
Isn't that what you do when you semi-retire? You put the TV to full-time employment?
Yeah, pretty much.
I think
Sorry. You've been trying to talk for like a minute, Rebecca.
I have 4 TVs.
4 driveways or 4 TVs?
4 TVs, 2 driveways. And a partridge in a pear tree.
And a ram in the driveway.
No, so there's a couple of things. So I've had this truck twice, actually. I had one about a year ago, coincidentally. And I really like it. I mean, it's very drivable. It's great looking. It drives a lot smaller than it looks. It can be a little beastly to park because it's a big truck. But one of my pet peeves was last year, the one that I had did not have the split tailgate. They hadn't unveiled that yet. They unveiled it in February at Chicago. And that is, I think, a big improvement. Now, I can't say I love it. It's still, it's functional. It's low grade gimmicky, but it's certainly better than trying to get into the truck bed via the license plate holder, which you can't even do when the truck bed door is down, the tailgate is down. So from that standpoint, it was a lot easier to use, and to get in. It did have a tonneau top on it, so I wasn't crawling in and out of a lot, but it just improves the functionality of that pickup truck bed for people that are shorter or just older or just don't have 6 foot long arms. So there was a lot of good things about that.
Yeah, those sound good. So what's gimmicky about it?
Well, it's that you can't drive with the split tailgate open, so it's not like it helps you with.
You can drive with one side of it open.
So it's funny, Sam, because I wasn't sure about that because when I looked at it, it looked there was a warning sign, and I interpreted that as at first I interpreted it as you could drive with one side open. But then when we looked at it again, we were like, I don't know. To be safe, I wouldn't drive with either side open. But then it kind of limits the usability. So you can drive with the shorter side open.
Yeah, I believe you can. So if you're carrying long objects, instead of them, leaning up over the top of the tailgate,
right,
like you would traditionally do, you can just leave that shorter side open and have it hanging out the back. And of course, if you're going to do that, make sure that you put a red flag or something on there, so that other drivers can see where the end of whatever your load is.
Yes.
Because that that does make it that's important for safety.
Yeah, for sure, it absolutely is. But
so do you bungee the short side to the closed side too? I don't know. We don't need to talk about how we're. No,
it stays open. It will stay in place.
Like it'll hold itself open?
Yeah, it's when you open it up to the sides, there's kind of a a latching,
Yeah.
a semi,
Like a
there's a
catch,
catch there that will hold it open, so it's not going to flop around as you're driving.
Right. Right. It will stay in place. So that was cool. I mean, again, it's one of those, it's significantly better than it used to be. It's not a multi-pro tailgate thing that, GMC has, but it's certainly better than it was. The other thing that was really remarkable about it was the amount of room in the back seat in that second row. It was unbelievable. I mean, my brother, believe it or not, is about 6'3", and he's actually shrunk a little bit in his early 60s now. And but he said he's got the seat all the way back, as far back as he can go. And there was still my brother-in-law who's 6 feet. He sat in the back comfortably. I mean, there was just so much room in that thing. And, there was just a lot of utility to it. Super, super comfortable. Heated seats, cooled seats. I found the infotainment system to be really easy to use. My brother said it took him a couple of hours to get used to it and to kind of adjust to it and to find his way around a little bit. He thought it was a little bit clumsy in places, and he drives a lot of different vehicles because he travels a lot for work and is always renting a car. So he's pretty savvy in that regard. So he said it took him a little bit longer, but I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. I think that's, pretty commonplace these days. I did, one of the things that we noticed when we were driving together at one point, it has, if you back up and it thinks you're going to hit something, it practically slammed us against the seat.
I had the same experience when I drove the Ram.
It was so dramatic.
That's the rear automatic emergency braking. So when it detects an object behind you,
sure,
it will stop.
Yes.
And when it happened to me, and I think I talked about it on the show. I was going into some tall grass to do some photography with it.
Oh, that's right.
And I was backing down this little hill, and there was just some tall grass behind me, so there was nothing I couldn't run over. But the sensors detected that grass, and it just slammed on the brakes. And you're right, it is very abrupt.
It's very well. So this was my brother-in-law is very particular about his driveway, understandably. And so he has those orange little sticks lining it for the snow plows. And so it was one of those like little bendable iron sticks. And that's all it was. Like, we were going to destroy that thing if we had run over it, not the other way around. And it was just like, wow, that just like, it was almost like whiplash. It was so dramatic. So really abrupt. So, it'd be nice to have some kind of sensitivity there on that. But otherwise, it was a really nice vehicle to drive. I mean, being as small as I am, I could get in and out of it. The running boards came down very easily, tucked back inside. Then I certainly was able to adjust the seat and get a nice, comfortable driving position. And I didn't feel like it was so big that I was uncomfortable, or that I had this huge truck around me. Which I did. But I did.
but that's what you were talking about last week too, right? Like your friend with the giant SUV. Sort of once you get comfortable, you just they fit.
Exactly. Well engineered ones do. And certainly the more modern vehicles, because as I think I had mentioned a while ago now on the Honda Pilot, that the Honda Pilot and to some extent the MDX as well. They drive really big and heavy, and the Pilot especially, I just had that feeling of like I'm the only person in a 7-seater. Whereas with the Ram, I really, I felt really comfortable in it, and didn't, I definitely, parked every once in a while. I parked a little bit further away just because it was easier to park. But at the same time, I think I had more of an issue with the length of it than whether I was going to fit in a spot. So,
well, it's pretty wide too, though. Like it's a big
truck for sure.
All current full size trucks are huge. I mean, they are enormous. That's
true. It's so interesting that. So you didn't feel like the Ram drives I guess it's a different category, so it's less of a sin if a pickup truck drives heavy and sort of, weighty. But you didn't feel like it was just like this giant, massive thing.
No, that's what the Lexus LX570 is for.
Coming up.
Okay. I was I was really very pleasantly surprised. I didn't feel like that. I do remember driving, not the new Nissan Titan, but the previous edition. And that was just a beast. It was just a beast. You just slogged around in it. And I haven't driven the new one yet, so I'm assuming they fixed some of that. But the Nissan Titan was really, I would say, the only full-size pickup truck that I did not enjoy driving.
I think the thing about the Ram is its suspension and steering, its driving dynamics are so much better than any other full-size truck that I think that's a big part of why it doesn't feel as ponderous, because it for its size, it feels comparatively nimble. If you can say that about a 3-ton truck.
No, I would describe it as
it's responsive.
Right. It's responsive. It's athletic.
Responsive, and it's very comfortable.
It is. I mean, so tomorrow I've got to go up go up to Massachusetts. I'm going to be on the road probably about 5 or 6 hours, and I would not have minded if I had still had the truck. I think I would have been fine with that. I think I probably would have enjoyed it.
Yeah. Anytime I get one of those, and the Rams especially, because they just have a nice interior and they have that full coil spring suspension, so they ride really nicely, and maybe that's why it still feels maneuverable and controllable, and it's because it's not bouncing you around the
not
interior. It's soaking up bumps. To me, it feels like you've got something that's just heavy. It's just big, and it's okay. It's not. I'm not complaining about it, but I'm aware of the size and the bulk of it, because the Ram is heavier, significantly heavier than either the GM pickups or the F-Series.
I mean, I didn't feel like it's ponderous though, and that's
I don't know. There's such I agree. It's not ponderous, but it's, to me, it feels like there's some mass here, but
for sure
managed well.
But I liked it though.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, again, like, especially driving in, we're not exactly in the open road here. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to drive it in Manhattan or anything, but it was for my suburban area, and, on the highway, and whether it was on 95 or the 2-lane Merritt Parkway, it was just really well behaved, very predictable, super comfortable, great visibility. I really, really liked it. I did find the bed was, it's kind of funny because we were complaining about how long it is. The bed was a little bit short, but it's a really.
Did you have the standard bed or the longer bed?
We had the standard bed.
Okay.
Yes, but that would be, I guess. On some level, I'm like, okay, if I have to say something I didn't like about it, that would be the only thing. I would probably go for a longer bed. But again, that just makes a longer truck, and then you're getting into all other sorts of trouble.
Yeah, and I think the choice there, if you're buying, largely comes down to if you're going to be towing or hauling loads. If your primary use for the truck is to tow stuff, and you're not going to be hauling big loads with it most of the time in the bed, you go for the shorter one.
Sure.
But if you do need to use that bed, you have the option of that 6.5 foot bed instead of the 5.5 foot bed.
Right. And that I would not have minded that at all, just for what we were, moving around and hauling cargo kind of stuff in it. But really, it just, it's just a beautiful truck. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
And I think you said you had a limited.
Yes.
So that one comes with the comes standard with the 4-corner air suspension as well, which further enhances the ride quality of this thing. I mean, it's already good with the coils.
Yes.
But with the air suspension, it really takes it up another notch.
It really does. I mean, the engineering that went into this is really impressive. It's just, it is definitely an everyday driver for sure. I can't remember exactly what we were getting for fuel economy. I'll find out from my brother. I do know that when it was delivered, it had a range of 550 miles.
Well, that's because it's got like a 70-gallon tank. too.
No, actually, well, that's
it's a
probably
30
the 33.
Yeah, it's a 33-gallon tank. But again, that's pretty awesome. If you're out, in Wyoming and Montana and ranch country, that's exactly what you need. You need that kind of range.
Yeah, no, it's truck designed for truck stuff. And that's that's why I think I like it so much. There's a lot of people that do long highway slogs with their trucks, and the Ram is really comfortable for that. They've made that trade-off to, yes, it's actually 2/3 of a full-size SUV with a bed in the back.
Yes, exactly. So I had
and that's fine.
So it was the 5.7 liter, as Sam pointed out pre-show. It did have the e-torque in it. And so it was very, it had the stop-start, but really non-intrusive. So Sam, talk a little bit more, because you certainly know it better than I do, about the e-torque.
Yeah, so this is FCA's branding for their 48-volt mild hybrid system. And it's e-torque is standard on the Pentastar V6, and it's optional on the Hemi V8. And it's also on the Wrangler with the 2-liter turbo engine, and they'll be getting more next year. In fact, there was a report out today that the Durango is going to get the e-torque Hemi available in 2020, and probably the Pentastar as well. And what this is, there's a different configurations, but standard most vehicles for the last 60 odd years have had 12-volt electrical systems. So you have a 12-volt alternator on your engine, and your battery and all the systems in the vehicle run on 12 volts, except some of the electronics that run on 5, but that's not important. And what we're starting to see now is implementation of 48-volt electrical systems. So this is what we call a low voltage electrification system. And they picked 48 because at 60 volts, there's different regulations as far as safety, to protect, anybody who's working on the truck, or, emergency responders, things like that. So you need extra equipment required when you go above 60 volts. And that's what you have, on full hybrids, strong hybrids. Those are running like 300-400 volts in battery electrics. 48 volts, you don't have to do all that. But what you get is you replace the standard 12-volt alternator with a belted starter generator, and it's a 48-volt generator that not only does it do some regenerative braking for you and recovers that energy and stores it in a lithium-ion battery, but it also provides more electrical power to the rest of the system. Provides on the Hemi, it's 130 foot-pounds. I think it's either 130 or 180 extra foot-pounds of torque on top of what the Hemi V8 already produces. And because you've got that lithium-ion battery storing energy, when you do things like auto stop-start, with a lot of 12-volt systems with stop-start, a lot of times you'll find, especially if it's hot out or cold out, when the engine shuts off in the middle, at an intersection, for example, a lot of times, the system's always monitoring the battery. As the battery voltage starts to drop, it'll restart the engine so that, before it gets too low, so that you make sure that it can restart. And if that happens while your foot is still on the brake pedal, while you're sitting there at the intersection, that's when you tend to feel the restarts the most.
Okay.
Because when you're applying the brakes, it gives a reaction torque. If the engine restarts while the vehicle's moving, then it becomes almost transparent. And so one of the things the 48-volt system does is it allows you to get to keep the engine off longer. So that's better for fuel economy. And because it typically doesn't restart, because it can stay off for a couple of minutes at a time. Because of that, now you can keep it off until the vehicle, until you really start ready to roll again, and your foot's off the brake pedal. So tends to be a lot smoother system. And because it's got more power, it also restarts the engine faster. And it gets you about, on the Hemi, it's usually good for about 15% extra fuel economy.
Yeah, they're saying 2 miles per gallon, 13%
Yeah.
improvement. It's 130 foot-pounds of torque.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, pound-foot, sorry, of torque.
Yeah, so the improvement in fuel economy depends on which configuration you get, whether it's a 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive. But
Sure.
yeah, it averages out to around 15%, over the fleet. Some are a little bit more, some are a little bit less. But it's a really good system that it's relatively low cost. It's definitely cheaper than a strong hybrid system. It doesn't have all the capabilities of a strong hybrid system, so you're not going to be driving around on electricity alone.
Right.
But when you're going down the road and you need to accelerate, to pass somebody or to maintain speed going up a hill, it can give you that extra bit of torque without having to use more fuel as well. So even though the engine's running, the engine doesn't necessarily have to work as hard by itself. You can use the energy from the battery and get some of that extra performance without hurting your fuel economy.
So it's about a $1,350 upgrade from the 5.7 V8 without it. So
Right.
the 5.7 is a $1,395 upgrade. This is on the 2019. And then the 5.7 with e-torque is $2,645. I think that what's remarkable about it is, that is the transparency of it. There's no markings on it. You certainly don't really feel it when you're driving. And yet it is providing you with that better fuel economy and and certainly that better driving experience. But the regenerative braking, like none of that was really very obvious when we were driving it for the week. It was impressive. And I also like the fact that I could change it. I remember when it was snowing lightly when I left, and so I was able just to do on the fly and change it to 4-wheel drive and automatic, went back to 2-wheel drive, and that kind of, again, that's sort of engineering and functionality.
Yeah, and this is what's interesting about FCA's approach to the to trying to sell electrification, because American consumers, especially in trucks and SUVs, they don't really seem to be all that interested in paying extra for more fuel economy, and so they're not emphasizing the fact that it's a mild hybrid. They are they badge it as e-torque. So they're selling the capability it gives you, not the fuel economy. The fuel economy just comes along as an extra bonus. You're
how much better is the fuel economy?
For 2 miles per gallon.
It works
by up to
overall
2
on
miles
average.
per
It works. Yeah, it depending if it's a 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive, which configuration, it works out to between 13 and 18% improvement in fuel economy.
Yeah, I want to say that we.
So what's its combined EPA rating?
And I apologize because I can't find the Mulroney that came with it, but I want to say we were getting in the low 20s. Is that somewhere in there? I mean, we weren't going hard at it, obviously, but it was good. I mean, it was. I'll tell you right now. Again, I keep bringing it up, but we'll talk about it. But that Lexus I'm getting like 14 in that thing.
Yeah. Well, so like $1,300 for what amounts to probably less than 6 months worth of fuel that you're saving for that bump, and you get extra performance out of it. That doesn't seem too bad to me. Like it pays back in a couple of ways, I guess, if you want to try to wrap your head around it.
Well, and the other thing too is that I tell people that you want to buy something that isn't going to be out of date, when you go to sell it, and so that's something else too that I think you look at and think, is this going to make it more attractive whenever I go to sell this thing? And I think it would. I think, because vehicles are only going to be getting more efficient. And so, if you go to sell this thing in 5 years and it has e-torque, all cars are going to have e-torque now. In 5 years kind of thing, or at least have that type of technology. And so I think it's a wise move. I think it's if your budget allows, I would say that it's a good thing to bump up to.
Yeah, it's rated at 19 combined, 17 city, 22 highway for a 4-wheel drive.
I have never gotten that kind of fuel economy out of a
Really?
Ram.
So we were definitely in that 2021 range for the highway.
No, I think I maybe
Yeah,
got
but you're a
18
jerk on the road. You've admitted
average.
that.
That's true. I do drive like an ass.
You're a mass. You can't help it.
Let's jump over to the other truck you had, the LX570, which is, I really, really like it. It's super outdated, but it's got that kind of quaint charm. It doesn't sound like it charmed you quite as much.
It did not
though.
charm me quite as much. And
What was not charming about it?
it was a lot. It's so ironic that I'm saying this after having just talked about how I felt like the Ram drove smaller. I felt like the Lexus was just a gigantic vehicle. I mean, I felt kind of silly in it because it's one of those, like, I really was very conscious of the fact that the majority of the time I was the only passenger, the only driver, the only occupant of this vehicle. And, I mean, this thing is, so it's got a 5.7 liter V8, 8-speed automatic. It's funny because it's very similar to the Ram in terms of the engine transmission.
Yeah, but their 5.7 is weaker than
exactly.
the Hemi.
I was very conscious of the fact that it was for sure a truck-based vehicle, very antiquated technology. It was luxurious. I mean, it's still a Lexus, but it just kind of
right.
Yeah, well,
they make a big deal about their semi-aniline leather.
Yeah, well, the
like
LX is, it's the Lexus version of the Toyota Sequoia, which of course shares its platform with the Tundra.
No,
I
is
thought
it? I thought the
Land
LX was the Prado. It's the Land
No, the
Cruiser.
GX is the Land Cruiser.
I thought the GX was the
Sequoia,
the 4Runner.
No, the GX.
The GX is the 4Runner.
Right, isn't that what I just
and
said?
The LX.
Yeah.
No. GX is 4Runner. LX is Land Cruiser. I thought.
That's what
I didn't.
thought.
Well, you know what? Either way, they're old.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. The Sequoia is. I don't think it's based on the Sequoia, but even if it is, it's like that's an old vehicle. And the Land Cruiser is also. I remember when that was debuted, which was many years ago. I was still writing for Autoblog, and I haven't written for Autoblog in 4+ years now. So, yeah, it's been a while. I wonder if that's part of the charm, though, that the Lexus SUVs, like the traditional SUVs, just don't change, and Lexus people don't care. Like they like that consistency because it's not a bad vehicle, like you said. It's just perhaps it feels a little antique. It's also crazy expensive.
Is crazy expensive. So this one that I had, which was let me take my glasses off so I can see something. It doesn't have a specific.
You're right. The LX is the Land Cruiser.
Yeah, because it even looks like it.
Either way.
It even looks like the thing.
Yeah.
So this one had the luxury package, which has a semi-aniline leather trimmed interior, the outboard seats, heated and ventilated front and second row.
I thought you were going to say
seats,
outboard motors.
the Mark Levinson audio system, the dual screen DVD, this and that. So the base price for this thing was $91,380, and as delivered, it was $100,260. Okay, but let me tell you just a couple things. So for instance, the heated seats took a good 15 minutes to heat up. Okay.
Oh, so by the time they start to get warm, you're where you need to be.
You are where you need to be. The heated steering wheel, same thing. It took for the car. I spent more time being cold in that car than I did being warm.
I wonder if that's a setting that they can adjust maybe at the dealer, because that's one of the things like with the Volvos. You could do that with the dealer. You could set the heated seats to like scorch or like Florida warm. It depends on where you are. You can adjust it.
Sure.
So
okay.
That may
I don't
be
know.
a configuration. But
I don't know. I mean, the heads-up display was good. I did like that. it it did have that cool box in it, which is kind of clever, in the center console.
Yes.
So that was kind of fun. The power moonroof, I couldn't figure out how to turn it on, and I kept turning off the door light. So then I would go to get in it at night, and not only was it dark and cold, but it was dark as well.
It's dark. It's a cave that you drive.
Oh my gosh. Again, it's one of those things that it's purpose built. So if
what purpose is it built for?
Well,
it's a truck based. Well, I tell you. So my friend Tom has one. He's actually had two in a row.
See, Lexus people don't care. They love them.
Well, he loves it because the back seat, the third row, it's this was a 5-passenger, but the back cargo area is so big, it can comfortably fit his elderly dog. And she can lay down in there, and she has plenty of room, and she's all cozy and warm. And because apparently she doesn't care that it takes forever to warm up. And so,
he could buy a Suburban and do the same thing.
I know.
What else can hold an elderly dog? Our Honda Civic.
Yeah.
Listen,
and she's a golden retriever.
It's
a big dog.
You're in Greenwich.
She's a big dog.
All right.
Matilda's a big dog.
Fairfield County requires you to buy the truck that is purpose designed for a purpose you're never going to use it for. It's very much like suburban Boston.
Okay, so
this competes with the stuff like the G-Wagon maybe not quite the G-Wagon, but
ridiculous. Well, okay, I haven't driven the G-Wagon, so I should.
I was going to say not the G-Wagon, the G-Class.
So the competitive set, G-Wagon, Range Rover, would you put that in the same class?
Yeah, I would. I'm trying to remember. Not the G-Wagon though. The other, the
GLS.
Well, I would put the GL.
Well, they changed all their names now.
In there.
But the big one,
the GLS.
The GLS, which was gorgeous.
Yeah. So, because I do think like Land Rover, Range Rover, because the LX570, because it's based on the Land Cruiser, it's got 3 lockable differentials. It's got a lockable center differential. You can lock either axle. Like, it's really capable. You're never going to use it.
But this is the thing too, is that why go up to the Lexus version of it? Why not just get the authentic Toyota Land Cruiser?
And the Land Cruiser
that's the other thing too.
Right. The Land Cruiser is also super nice. It looks better. It's still pretty luxurious. And you can get that sucker up to $90,000 too. So...
Yes, but the Lexus, I don't know. I mean, it's, it was a beautiful vehicle. It looked beautiful. It was a lot to drive every day.
Well, it's also got a wimpy engine. It
does. Well, that's the thing, is that I didn't feel like I was, the comparison to that emotional connection between the Ram 1500 and the Lexus. It was actually kind of fun to have them like compare and contrast, because they were both enormous vehicles.
Yeah.
But the difference in how it made me feel was really significant, because I felt like in the Lexus I was driving a 10-year-old car.
Well, you are. It's probably a 15-year-old car.
Well, right. But I was very aware of it, especially when you compare and contrast it with all that engineering that we just talked about with the Ram.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's got the Lexus V8 is a good engine, but it's like, I think you're down about 100 horsepower compared to that Ram. It's 383 horsepower, which like that's not far off of V6 territory these days, and turbo V6s go past that pretty easily, and it can only tow 7,000 pounds, which you can tow that with a Durango with the Hemi, which is. I mean,
I think the number one thing, like if you read some of the reviews about the Lexus LX570, they are scorching. I mean, it's like, wow, people do not like this vehicle.
How did you feel? And, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, how did you feel about the infotainment? It has that mouse thing on the dash. I don't mind. I actually like that. It's not bad.
It's better than the Lexus touchpad.
Yeah, that's true.
It is better than the Lexus touchpad, but only slightly.
And it has a large screen now.
It does have a large screen. It jumped around so much that, it just, there was nothing really simple about it. I don't know, I mean, I will tell you one of the things that drives me crazy. So, and I've run into this before, where, and I apologize, this may be actually because I just got the Toyota Corolla, where it's not easy to set up the phone, but I was able to do that pretty well in the 570. I didn't have as much of an issue with it, but it just, it's not really where I want to be. What can I say?
While you've been talking, it's looking up some specs, and for what it's worth, the LX570 engine is 383 horsepower. That's only 10 horsepower less than the Hemi. The Hemi is only 393 horsepower.
I thought the Hemi was something.
Then what? So what's going on with it then? Like, why don't I feel?
The Hemi has e-torque. I thought the Hemi was.
But even the non e-torque Hemis feel strong, and I think it's actually probably more the torque. I'll have to look up the torque numbers for the two of them.
I'm not saying that the 5.7 Hemi is like a super powerhouse engine. Like that's also, it's aged and it's down on power compared to all of the other engines kind of around it, especially when we talk about turbocharged V6s.
Well, actually, there's not that much difference in torque. The Hemi
think
is 410 foot-pounds, and the Lexus is 403.
I think it was the calibration of it then too.
It could be. Well, I
think that e-torque does make a difference.
Oh, I bet it does. It fills in that.
In that Hemi, you've got that immediate sensation of acceleration, and with the Lexus, I felt like I was barging in even when there was nobody on the highway.
Yeah, well, and the Lexus V8 too. It's a different kind of power delivery. I bet if you looked at the power curves, it's a rever. It's a dual overhead cam V8 versus the Hemi, which is it's not a Hemi, it's a wedge, but it's
right.
It's a pushrod V8. It's going to deliver its torque like a truck engine down low. Even at that, the 5.7 Hemi still to me feels a little peaky. So for whatever reason, like old V8s are getting old. They're getting long in the tooth.
I mean, I put it in the different modes that it comes in, the eco and sport, and it was fine. I mean, I think that it just always felt big. I never felt like I was in an athletic, that athletic, performance oriented vehicle. I was in a big truck based SUV.
I think that's part of the charm, though. Like, I think it's interesting that you say the
part of a
reviews
charm
are scorching.
in a stone cottage. It's not part of the charm.
Again, that's the thing that like you buy because of the quote unquote character, right? And then once you get into the ownership experience, you're like, man, that was stupid.
Yeah. Well, and again, and the price point. When you think about like the Lincoln Navigator. We think about competitive set, and you think about like the Lincoln Navigator, the BMW X7, like there's some really good vehicles out there in this size and class.
Yeah. And the way it's going to be used, I think that those are perfectly fair to cite as competitors. I'm looking at the center console, the shot of the center console. I'm like, there's a lot of buttons, a lot of switches. It's knobs. It's complicated because it's very capable. And I think that there may be a very special subset of these owners that actually take them off-road. I think the only time I would expect to see one off-road is like, down on the Cape with like an oversand permit or something for the rich people that don't care about, destroying their $100,000 vehicles.
But even the interior, even some of the materials that they used, I think are dated. It doesn't give that feeling of clean, simple, modern lines.
Okay.
It just doesn't. And then I hate those analog clocks drive me crazy. There is a second one. That is a digital, because the analog, I'm like, I need to know if I'm 1 minute or 10 minutes behind schedule, and I'm like, I don't know what that, you just glance at it and you're like, I don't know what that says. It's so
I think that's such a holdover. Like it
exactly. So, I don't know if they're planning on refreshing this or not, but
one big difference between these two is the Lexus is about 500 pounds heavier than the Ram.
Oh, that'll make a big difference.
Well,
I bet that cuts into the towing too. I was not impressed. 7,000 pounds is just not that much, but it's not. I guess it's not. Really,
I mean, it's more than most.
It's not your tow.
It's more than most people would use for a light duty vehicle anyway. Most people that are towing with a light duty truck or utility are probably towing a boat, that's in the 4,000 to 5,000 pound range. So 7,000 pounds is actually probably sufficient for most light duty uses. Once you get beyond that, and you're in the 10, 12,000 pound range or more, most people are stepping up to a medium duty anyway, a Ford Super Duty or, the Ram heavy duties or GM heavy duties.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the other thing too with the Lexus that dated it was my phone was too large to fit into the slot that they had for the wireless charging pad.
Wow.
Yeah, and I have a Galaxy S9 Plus that's almost 2 years old.
Okay.
And it was too big.
Well, so it's got to be headed for at least a significant redesign, if not complete redo at some point. That's entropy. That's going to keep happening to this thing.
Exactly.
Until they fix it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's lovely.
So what?
I like it. Looks handsome in pictures.
It's a very handsome vehicle. It is. And again,
I don't know that I'd necessarily agree with that.
You don't like the grill?
Right?
It's
an imposing vehicle.
Okay, I'll give you that.
I far prefer the authenticity of the Land Cruiser.
Yeah, I like the Land Cruiser.
Because I feel like the Land Cruiser doesn't pretend to be anything than what it's not. This is a very tarted up Land Cruiser, and I'd rather just have a Land Cruiser.
Well, see, and now you can get the Land Cruiser with blacked out chrome and copper color wheels, or it's just you can get the Land Cruiser so that it looks a lot more authentically rough and tumble. Where you're still not going to take it anywhere.
Now,
but
one important thing to consider, though, if you're comparing this to, say, a Range Rover, is this thing will probably run, for 20, 30 years with nothing but oil changes and new tires, whereas Range Rover probably won't.
No, that's a very fair statement.
What you should do is it's breathtaking to go on the Boston Craigslist and type in Range Rover or Land Rover and just sort by price, low to high. The amount of depreciation those things take, you can get yourself a 2008, I saw it last night, a 2008 Land Rover, no, a Range Rover Sport. So, the Land Rover looks on the LR4 frame for $4,000.
No,
it's just stunning depreciation. That's a special case. I'm sure that one was a complete piece of crap and had a lot of stuff wrong with it.
Was it flooded? What happened?
Who knows?
It?
But they depreciate like an anvil slid off a cliff. They just they're just trouble, and everybody knows it. And once they get past a certain mileage and age, they're worthless. And that's true. The Toyota is always going to have. I think a more satisfying ownership experience.
Yeah, for sure. Again, it's. I do think there's better choices out there, but for durability, reliability, it's hard to beat from that standpoint. I'll give it that.
I like the Land Cruiser better. I'm looking at a picture of it now. It's way better looking in the front. So. Yeah.
Yeah, the big grills I'm not a fan of, but some people really like it. It definitely, it makes a big presence in a parking lot.
That's for sure. All right.
Yep, it has presence. I'll give it that.
Yes.
Not a presence I would want to be in the presence of, but
yeah.
Some people, if you look at high-end goods, there's just not necessarily any taste involved.
Very true.
So let's go from the LX570, $100,000 Land Cruiser based, sport utility, to another vehicle based on old architecture that's a lot less expensive. So you've been driving,
but not as inexpensive as you might hope.
Well, yeah, I think, and
or at least not
price,
not by sticker price. Anyway.
Right, sticker price versus reality that has a big delta here. So you're driving the 2020 Mitsubishi Outlander Sport, which I quite like, and it's got a new nose for 2020. Doesn't it?
Yeah, it got a mild refresh. The new nose is definitely a lot better looking than before. Overall, the Outlander Sport is not a bad looking vehicle from the outside. And
But on the inside,
well, let me say this. Let me kind of set the stage here. So the Outlander Sport, fits into this subcompact crossover segment. Basically same segment as Honda HR-V, Jeep Renegade, the Mazda CX-30 we talked about last time, and a whole bunch of other vehicles in that segment. And definitely better looking on the outside now than it was before. The inside, the layout's not bad, but it definitely has that Mitsubishi cheap feel on the inside. A lot of hard plastics. There are a couple of surfaces that are, soft touch. It didn't come across to me as bad as I remember it the last time I drove one of these or any other Mitsubishi. It has been somewhat improved. Yeah. So, it wasn't horrible, and
okay. So yeah, go ahead.
So it definitely felt, it was, I didn't hate it as much as I expected to. That said,
okay, so my take on it has always been like it drives okay and it has decent ergonomics.
Yeah.
It's just overall the feeling it's old and it feels kind of cheap.
Yeah, everything is where you expect it to be for the most part, which is good. The screen's at a decent position and everything, and that much is fine. The ride quality is perfectly fine. No complaints there. I wouldn't push it too hard through corners, but I wouldn't necessarily do that with most utilities in this segment. The engine, the one I have is the GT all-wheel control version. So this is the top end version of this vehicle. And it has the 2.4 liter engine, which has like 176 horsepower roughly, which is fine. It's got adequate performance. If you don't mind a CVT that gives you that motorboating effect, it doesn't try to simulate the behavior of a standard step ratio transmission. It's fine. It's not too noisy. So they have done a decent job on the NVH. So if you're really listening for it, you'll hear that as you accelerate, the engine revs up to 4,000 RPM and just stays there, as your speed is increasing. But it's not real loud, so it's not that bothersome.
Is that one of the improvements, would you say? Because I think that's one of the areas.
NVH?
I think NVH is one of the areas that I most I struggle with the most when it comes to Mitsubishi.
Yes, it's definitely improved in NVH. So it's not, and this is one of the things that, as I drove it, as I've been driving it, I don't dislike it as much as I have most of the recent Mitsubishis I've driven. So it's definitely better there. And actually, I can honestly say I don't really dislike it. It's fine. It's a perfectly adequate, compact crossover, subcompact crossover.
What's the price point on it?
That's the problem. Sticker price on this thing is, we in recent years, Mitsubishi I think has largely survived on being able to sell vehicles to people who basically can't afford anything else. Doing a lot of subprime loans, doing a lot of discounting. This one, let me find it here. This one here, pretty full.
They do a lot of zeros. Zero down, zero payments.
Fully loaded on this one. It's $28,920. Okay.
See, that doesn't seem bad to me.
It doesn't.
No, but comparatively,
it doesn't in isolation. The problem is, last week we talked about the Mazda CX-30, and for the as much as we have complained in the past about Mazda's recent move up market and getting more premium, the CX-30 has actually got a lot of value in it, and it's actually priced surprisingly aggressively. It's very nice to drive. There's a high quality. When I compare the equipment on this one for just shy of $29,000 delivered, it prices out. It's comparable to the CX-30 Select, which is the mid-level trim of the CX-30, and I priced it out as close as I could to a CX-30 with the same equipment, and the CX-30 was $2,000 cheaper than this on the sticker, and that's a big difference.
Wow.
So
that's a big difference.
Yeah. Mazda
keep in
is
mind,
pricing, like you said, very aggressively.
You go to a Mitsubishi dealer, and the chances of you paying sticker, it are pretty low. You're probably going to get a pretty hefty discount on anything you buy from Mitsubishi. So, you could probably get this for less than the price of a CX-30 out the door. But, having a sticker price that high on this thing, and, this one was loaded, and you can't even get some of the features that you can get on that Mazda. You can't get things like adaptive cruise control, heads-up display, and a bunch of other features. So, for the same price as this, you could get a Mazda with a lot more stuff on it. And the Mazda is a lot nicer to drive and has a vastly better interior. It's a much nicer place to spend time.
And you're going to get better appreciation.
Less depreciation, yeah.
Yes, less depreciation as well. It's going to be worth more in the end. I think that's the biggest struggle that I have with Mitsubishi, that kind of price range, is that, as you say, in isolation, it's fine. But when you look at the really good vehicles that are in that competitive set, it's just got to be. So you got to do better on pricing.
But to be fair, okay, so you had the 2.4 GT, which is that's the top of the line of the Outlander Sport.
Uh-huh.
So if you wanted to try one of the mid-level ones to say, let's compare mid-levels, mid-level compact crossovers, not necessarily just the Mazda, the price drops down with the 2.0 SE. You're down to just shy of 26, so 25,795.
Right, but again,
for the,
at that price point, you can get the CX-30 Select that has more stuff on it.
Right, I don't disagree.
If you're comparing as close as you can get to apples, with this versus the CX-30, or for that matter, a lot of the other vehicles in this segment,
or a CRV,
or an HRV, these are
Mini Cooper.
these are smaller than the CRV and RAV4. So it's
so like an HRV.
Yeah, okay. it's in the HR. It's the same size as an HRV or CX-30. So for the price, at any given price point, you're going to get more equipment in the competitive set. More stuff is going to be standard. And they're generally going to have a nicer interior. They're more pleasant place to spend time than the CX-30, which is, or rather than the Outlander Sport, which is, unfortunate. Now, as I said, chances are you go into a Mitsubishi dealer, you're going to be able to haggle down a pretty hefty discount on one of these things. You're unless you're going in and just saying, here's my credit card, charge it or whatever, if you make any effort at all, you're probably going to get a lot lower price than this out the door. So, take that for what it's worth.
But don't you think that's the case on a lot of these vehicles, though? I mean, that's the thing.
Not necessarily.
Not all of them, but there is some discounting that goes on.
But my guess is the discounting is going to be heavier at a Mitsubishi dealer than it's going to be at a Honda or a Mazda dealer.
Oh yeah, for sure. It will be. But then I also look at something like the Kia Soul, or something from Hyundai. That's the thing, is that there's so much competition in this segment that it's just it's tough to say to somebody, yes, you should definitely go after that Mitsubishi.
Right. And the other thing is, if what you're looking for, if your priority is value and getting a really low price and getting a good vehicle for a low price, the other thing you have to keep in mind is that there are now a bunch of vehicles that are in the market or coming into market in the next few months that, are in the same size class that, kind of have some of the same level of cheapness, if you will, as the Mitsubishi, but are actually a lot nicer in a lot of ways, like the Hyundai Venue and the Nissan Kicks, that you can get those for, for under 20 grand. And, they are frankly, I think, nicer than this Mitsubishi.
Well, and then of course you bring in the whole used car market as well.
There's that too.
And what can you get in a 2 or 3 year old vehicle for that 25?
On the other hand, one thing Mitsubishi does have is they actually offer a really good warranty on their vehicles. So this one, it's got 5 years, 60,000 mile bumper to bumper warranty, 10 years, 100,000 miles on the powertrain, 5 years, unlimited mileage, roadside assistance. So that's actually
Is that similar to Hyundai?
I think that's actually better than Hyundai now. Well, I think it's the same powertrain
Okay.
warranty, same 10-year powertrain warranty.
Yeah, same
I think
powertrain
the bumper
for
to bumper
sure, but I didn't
warranty.
know.
I think
Yeah.
I think Hyundai is still at 3 years, 36,000 miles, which is pretty much the industry standard these days. So you actually do get a really good warranty on this. So if you have any issues, it'll be covered for a longer period of time.
There are reasons to buy a new car, and sometimes that new car becomes a Mitsubishi. Like there are practical reasons for it. I think.
Yeah, I mean, getting a warranty is having a warranty on a new car is one of the real benefits of buying a new car versus buying a used car. And because the warranty is as long as it is on this, I'm not sure what Mitsubishi's policies are on warranty transfer. When you sell it, but if you were to buy a 2 or 3 year old Outlander Sport, used one, you'd potentially still have several years of warranty coverage, bumper to bumper warranty coverage on that thing, which is that's not something to be taken lightly.
Yeah, no, that's not trivial for sure.
So how did you the other thing that's new for this car this year is the I think every model year Mitsubishi brings out a tweaked audio and display, like an tweaked infotainment system, and so this year is no different. There's a new 8-inch they call it the smartphone link display audio with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, whatever. So it has a couple of knobs. It has new touchscreen interface or new UI. How did that work?
It's fine. It's a simple interface. And you turn it on. You've got 5 icons on the screen. One of which, because there's no nav available on this. If you want nav, you have to use your phone, which is actually probably as good or better than most built-in nav systems anyway. So you've got Android Auto and CarPlay support. If you want to listen to, basically the only reason you would use the stock infotainment is if you wanted to listen to radio, terrestrial radio. So if you want to listen to Sirius XM or listen to your local radio stations, you'd use that. Other than that, there's not really anything else. You've got proper knobs for the climate control, which is always a good thing. You've got rotary knobs for volume and tuning, always a good thing. And then if you want to use Android Auto or CarPlay, you have the touchscreen.
You see, I keep coming back to, as much as we complain that it's sort of the bottom of the class, right, and it's old hardware, it doesn't drive badly. It drives, rides and handles pretty well. It's pretty composed. There are some flaws, like you talked about, that CVT. But
even that is mitigated by the improved NVH, so it's not
right.
that big a deal.
The ergonomics are good. It definitely feels old, just the sort of the being in it and the quality of the materials and stuff, and just the packaging. It's not the newest, most clever, most space efficient platform. But taken on as a whole, on its merits, price aside, it's not the worst thing ever.
No, it's not. It's not terrible. I didn't hate it. Yeah.
And they're making improvements. And I think that's important too, is that if they're paying attention to feedback on things like NVH, I mean, that was, when I had it, I recall, I hit a bump and I really thought my teeth were going to fall out. And so pay attention to that kind of stuff, soften some of that, put some more insulation in, if they're continuing to try to improve their product. And that's,
yeah, I mean,
that's what Chrysler does. Look at the Charger, look at the Challenger. Yeah. Those things are ancient, and they just
serve
keep
a totally different purpose, though, and there's not a lot of competition for them.
No, they do, but the method of keeping those things.
Well, yeah, they do special editions and all sorts of stuff.
In the absence of really new vehicles and new platforms, which hopefully should be coming in the next couple of years from Mitsubishi as they start to utilize some of the hardware from the Renault-Nissan Alliance, at least as long as that survives. They have at least done a decent job of upgrading this thing. And like I said, it's not a terrible vehicle. It's a decent vehicle. The biggest issue I have with it at this point is that, at least based on sticker price, is the value proposition is just not there now.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think it's fair to say that the competition has gotten a lot stiffer, and this vehicle's aged in the market, and there is a replacement coming. But in the meantime, they've got to follow the same playbook that AMC followed when they, like they had Hornets, and they were like, you know what, we don't have a new car. How do we make this new? So you tweak the style,
you make the Eagle.
That's not really aspirational, though.
Oh, now they are.
Yeah, now they are. But the other thing too, I would be concerned about with Mitsubishi is just the dealer network.
Yeah, that's another. I think that's an issue, and that may actually be both the yin and the yang of why you would buy one or why you would avoid buying one. It's just, what dealer is close to you, and are they willing to deal with you, and
right.
How do they treat you? Volkswagen is cranking up plans for EVs. Are they nervous? Are they looking for redemption after they continue to cheat with diesels for so long? What's the scoop on that?
Probably some of both. They previously their previously announced plan was that they wanted to be selling 1 million EVs a year by 2025, and they have now pulled that ahead to 2023, which will be interesting to see if they can actually sell that many EVs a year.
That's kind of crazy. Can they make that many?
They should be able to by then. They'll have. By middle of next year, they'll have 3 plants, 2 in Germany plus 1 in China, building MEB platform vehicles. I think what was the number? I think for next year, they were planning to be up to like 250,000. By the end of next year, they'll be at a 250,000 unit annual run rate. And they want to grow that to 1.5 or to 1 million by 2023 and 1.5 million now by 2025. And that's just the ID badged EVs. That doesn't include the stuff from the other brands. So if you add in Audi, it's
like
Skoda and Porsche and everything else, they could, at least if they're, if everything pans out, they could conceivably be, doing a couple of million EVs a year.
I get the sense that they're completely out of their minds.
That's not entirely beyond the realm of possibility.
It's
a very aggressive plan.
And there's also just the demand part of this equation, which I realize is different in places like China where it's just shoved onto the market. But just because you build it doesn't mean they will come.
Yeah, So
Volkswagen is very good at sort of platform engineering and getting cars produced. That we're not talking about a beginner here. I believe they can do it. It just. Yeah, where's the demand? Because even the China car market is sort of lagging now, and Volkswagen's not really a big player in China, right? They're
they are the biggest in China.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The China market is very, very good for Volkswagen. It's just again that just seems like an awful lot because the Chinese market is like 20 million units, and I don't know how many of that
this year. 23,
I'm sorry?
23 or 24 this year.
23, 24? Okay. So that's still, you still got to get a hefty percentage of that to be EVs. And again, it's different because they do have mandates and it's a communist country and everything is just shoved onto the consumer there.
It's an authoritarian country. I don't know that I'd necessarily call it communist in the...
Oh, okay. Socialist. I'm sorry.
No, authoritarian.
What did you...
Authoritarian.
Authoritarian.
Yes.
But there's very strict mandates.
There are, and the Chinese authorities are doing a lot of things, like, for example, putting heavy restrictions on how many license plates they will issue for gasoline engine vehicles, or internal combustion vehicles in a lot of the major cities. So, if you want to get a car, if you're not like one of the first 100,000 in Beijing, or whatever the number is, I think it might even be less than that now. You're just not even going to be able to get a license plate and drive it in Beijing. And so you'll have to go for something electrified. And, China has significantly cut back their tax incentives for buying EVs this year. Since the middle of this year, they eliminated the incentive on the lower priced the shorter range cars. And they've slashed the incentive for the longer range cars, those with at least 250 kilometers, so about 140, 150 miles of range, in half. So it's and it's going to go away completely by 2021. So it's going to be more challenging for people to buy anything in China in the next couple of years. But that said, the European market is expected to get a lot stronger for EVs in the next few years. Starting in 2020, they are, the CO2 regulations are getting a lot tougher, and manufacturers are going to have to sell a lot more plug-in vehicles in order to hit their CO2 targets.
So yeah, let's be clear too. Like when they say that they're going to sell this many electric cars, it's the IDs, right? So these are full electric.
These are full battery electric,
like electrified,
right?
Yeah.
These are full battery electric vehicles, and the ID badged vehicles are the ones on the MEB platform.
Okay.
So
I still think they're bonkers.
Yeah, well, and
it still is a lot. It's a big percentage.
Yeah, and the first vehicle off that platform is the ID3, which is it's a golf-sized hatchback, and they started production of that at their plant in Zwickau, Germany, about a month and a half ago. And they've already built 10,000 of these, but they have not delivered any of them to customers. They've been renting parking lots to store these things. Because apparently Volkswagen has had some significant software problems with this thing. So they're not actually delivering them yet. And before any of these vehicles go to customers, they're going to have to get a full software update. And that's going to take probably another couple of months. And by the time they have the software update ready, they will have built at least another 10,000 vehicles. And so, they've got a real challenge with this. It now looks like they're not going to start delivering these to customers, even though they're building them. They're not actually going to start deliveries to customers until closer to next summer. By the time they get all these cars updated and fixed, and then they're ready to go.
It's significant that they've moved the timeline to be even more aggressive.
Well, the thing you also have to keep in mind is a lot of places in Europe are, seriously looking at, they're seriously talking about, banning internal combustion engine vehicles, like Sweden, is now looking at banning sales of new internal combustion vehicles by 2025. Norway, is doing the same thing. Denmark, the Netherlands, they're all looking at bans on sales of new ICEs. And then even, in other countries, places like Paris, are looking at banning ICE vehicles from the inner cities, sometime in the 2020s. So, they've already put in bans on older diesel vehicles, and they want to potentially ban the ICEs entirely from places like, central Paris, sometime in the coming decade. And most of Europe is looking at, eliminating internal combustion engine vehicles by 2040 at the latest, if not, by 2030. So, it may just end up being the only option for a lot of customers in Europe.
But there's always used cars too.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, if you've got cities that like Paris that are looking at banning ICEs, even if you have a used car or if you have an old car, you won't be able to drive it into the city. It just won't be allowed.
That is so. I mean, it's just the onus that puts on the consumer in terms of saying you have to buy a new car. And it has to be electric.
Not necessarily. It doesn't mean you have to buy a new EV, but it means you can't drive an ICE, which that could push a lot of people to using public transit.
That translates into
no. I mean,
the end result is that you have to buy a new or
not
used
necessarily.
EV.
You just maybe you don't buy a car at all. You buy a used public transit.
But that's not always practical though either.
It's a lot more practical in Europe than it is here.
It depends on where you live and work.
Well, a lot of people in Europe, live, in cities. They live in places where they have access to a really good public transit system. I mean, that's clearly not true in this country, but it is in Europe.
Yeah, no, I
and
realize that, but it still is a significant. I still feel like it's a significant burden.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Well,
not going to be
France
easy.
is a bunch of like they're socialist cheese-eating surrender monkeys.
Don't don't let Marine Le Pen hear you say that.
Yeah,
Or Boris Johnson.
I'm kidding.
You know.
I'm being a flip, but I do think Rebecca, you make a really good point. Like that kind of thing, like congestion charges, even and keeping cars out of the city core. It's going to be on the scale. It's going to be a change here in the U.S. on the scale of like urban renewal projects, where there's going to be pain and somebody's going to have to pay for it. And in the past, we've seen that the people that pay for it are not the wealthy.
Exactly.
But we have arranged our cities and to be very car centric.
We have in the U.S., yes.
Yes, and we have sort of set in place an ironclad will to just continue to create sprawl, because cities are urban cores are dense and they're efficient, and when you add transit to it, like that's the best way to house people, to move them around, and you create communities. And for whatever reason, people are trained to not like cities, so we want to be in the suburbs, and so we build houses on large lots where we cut down the trees and stuff, and then you create, so we've created this large sprawl problem. The fix to that is like it's either regulatory or customer opinion, and probably a mix of the two. And I think that's everybody's kind of dealing with it differently. And so in Europe, they're like I see what they're attempting, and they seem to have some success. London seems to have been pretty successful with their congestion charges, right, and keeping cars out of the core.
Yeah, they have actually been pretty successful with it for sure.
I liked that part of Times Square where there's no cars. That's great.
I know. Well,
Right?
So this is the thing: is that I think it's a little ridiculous to have a car in Manhattan. At the same time, the people that I do know that have cars in Manhattan, a number of them have children that have activities outside the city, and not like far outside the city, but just like even in Brooklyn or in the Bronx, or they'll, in Bronxville, like they'll go, they'll have to go to an outer borough in Queens for some kind of a soccer match or something like that. And that's what I have found in Paris as well, is that the people that I know that live in Paris that have a car, it's that kind of family thing. And what's ironic about it is that, we want to try and encourage people to live in the city, and yet, for live in the city longer. And yet, as soon as you start thinking about children and those activities, it's much harder to do those kinds of things and to keep and to fulfill their activities and not have a vehicle. And so then you tend to go out of the city then.
It's expensive too. Like I would take transit, but transit for me is super long. It's 300 something bucks a month.
And it's super long. It takes a long time. Well,
and
Boston
it always breaks.
Yeah,
so.
Boston is a good example of where it's, I tried to not drive my car sometimes, and it just wasn't practical. In San Francisco, I almost never drove my car. I could get around with no problem whatsoever. And so, it's again, like, I was in my late 20s before I even drove in Manhattan once. And because you just don't need to. But again, I think that it's very different if you have a family. And so as we try to encourage, it's just hard to the idea that banning something that millions of people still use and saying, you can't use that anymore without a sufficient and comparable alternative. I had to laugh, and this may get too political. I don't mean to, but that Greta, who, the teenager, she was getting all sorts of praise for sailing to some meetings. It took her 3 weeks. I'm like, are you kidding me? Who has 3 weeks to sail to a meeting? Like, I think I appreciate what she's trying to do, but the idea that should be praised, I think, is a little ridiculous and unrealistic.
I would love to use that as an excuse. They're like, I can't attend your meeting. I'm on a sailboat.
Exactly.
It's like the T-Pain defense. Like, I'm on a boat.
So I think we need to look and say, what are some viable transportation alternatives if we're going in this direction of, and I'm talking about Europe as well, of banning internal combustion engine vehicles. What I have always advocated for is, I'm certainly not against EVs at all. I was on the Barriers to Electric Vehicle Deployment Committee. It's more that if we make the most fuel efficient versions of what people already want to buy, and I think we've seen that with vehicles like the Ford F-150 V6 engine. People are willing to buy that. You give them a highly fuel efficient alternative. The Ram 1500 we just talked about, that e-Torque, that was really transparent to me and definitely transparent to my brother. Those are the types of technologies and efficiencies that give us a product that we still want, and yet at the same time are more fuel efficient, cleaner, give us that better emissions, and positive environmental impact.
I think that's part of it. I think what we don't solve, and we're not going to solve it here either, is regardless of how it's propelled, you've still got a car. A single occupant automobile, taking up that amount of footprint, whether it's an EV or whether it's internal combustion or whether it's a hybrid, you still got gridlock. And so solving the gridlock, I think that's a separate problem too.
That's a big part of the move away from cars, or individually operated vehicles. And, that there's, a lot of things that fall into that. That's part of what's driving all of this. They want to move people into shared transportation options. So you don't have so many cars, or so many vehicles on the road clogging the roads. And, right now in this country, there's 7 parking spaces for every car that we have.
That's ridiculous.
It is. It's insane. And if you look at a lot of, the average urban center in the United States, about 25 to 30% of the landmass on average is dedicated to parking cars. Now,
that's even more ridiculous. It's asphalt instead of grass or trees
or housing.
They paved paradise and put in a parking lot.
Look at a place like, you go back to San Francisco.
Joni Mitchell show.
The cost of housing in San Francisco is so insanely high, in part because of limited supply. And a big part of that is, obviously it's a landlocked city, so it can't expand outwards, but it can expand upwards, and that's something that has started to change in the last few years. But also the amount of space that's dedicated to parking cars. If you could reduce that, you could potentially have space for more people to live there, and be able, and if you have transportation options, good transportation options that aren't cars, then those people can get around and do the activities that they want to do.
And San Francisco, remember, when you've got the proletariat living in town, guess what they do? They pay taxes, which your big giant tech companies don't.
Right.
But the other thing too, but look at the failure of Ford Chariot. Those are the kinds of transportation alternatives that they're talking about, and yet it failed because people don't want to carpool with other people. The Chariot was a fancy bus. It's a fancy name for a bus.
Well, it's a small bus. It's a small bus, and it's an expensive option compared to riding, the Muni in San Francisco. It was significantly more expensive, and people, they didn't feel it was worth the cost, and so there wasn't enough demand for it. In principle, I think what they were trying to do was probably directionally correct, but it's not economically viable yet at this point. And I think we're going to see options like Chariot, these microtransit solutions start to come back around, but they need to go back and refine it in order to make it economically viable.
Well, I don't know that we've seen a significant increase in carpooling, though, for instance.
No, we haven't. All of these, at least here in the United States, we definitely haven't. The only thing we've seen a significant increase in over the last decade is use of ride hailing, which is essentially taxis. And
the scooters and the e-bikes.
Yeah, but even
e-bikes,
even that, is a tiny percentage of the total trips and the total miles traveled.
For sure. Absolutely.
And for that matter, even ride hailing, is still a tiny percentage of all trips. It's
Right.
obviously a significantly larger percentage in, a lot of these urban centers. But overall of total trips, it's far less than 2% of total trips.
Well, and it's not a reasonable commuting alternative.
No, it's
and that's
far
really
it's far
what
too
we have to.
it's far too
Right,
costly
that's-
for people to use as an alternative to commuting.
Exactly. So that's a big thing too, is how do we get people from home to work effectively and efficiently,
Yeah.
and that's
A good economic crash is going to take care of all of this. It's going to unleash the creativity of the common man. The wealthy are still going to prance around in their very expensive chariots, and that's fine. They're always going to be in their expensive cars.
we rarely prance.
I do not prance.
But they're going to,
I'm far too ungainly to prance.
Once we wind up in another depression, you're going to see everybody pull together, and the real creativity is going to come out, and we will solve that problem for you.
Right.
Because
in the meantime,
we're just going to have to get stuff done.
In the meantime, there is one other story here related to Volkswagen, and trying to figure out how they're going to sell all these EVs.
Oh, yeah, this was really interesting. The portable chargers.
Right. So, earlier this summer, I talked about, when I was out in San Jose, I was driving an EV for a few days, and the challenge of finding charging, or getting access to charging, because, you had EV drivers that were parked at, in front of chargers, but not actually using the chargers, and, blocking them when those of us who actually needed some electricity needed to use them. What Volkswagen has come up with here is a mobile charging solution for parking garages and parking lots, which, instead of having dedicated spaces for EV charging, what they basically have like one space for EV charging, and for these mobile chargers, and you can park anywhere you want. Then when you get out of the car, you park your car, you use the app to say, I need to be charged. And so they have this little tug that, they have a bunch of batteries that are sitting there plugged in, getting topped up, that are on wheels. And this little tug will go and grab one of these things, autonomously drive around the parking lot, find your car, plug the battery in, and then the tug lets go of the battery, goes back and gets another one, takes it out to somebody else's EV. So wherever you are, it brings the battery to you to charge your car, and then when it's done, it takes it away. And so you don't have to have dedicated parking spaces. You don't have to wire up the whole garage for parking, for charging EVs. It's another one of these steps in reducing the friction in owning an EV.
I love everything about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart solution, and I love that they're tackling that sort of end to end infrastructure question, and the fact that it's sort of this mobile robot that doesn't require a person brings the cost down. We'll see how effective it actually is. I'm sure there'll be some teething pains, but they've thought about it.
Yeah, and
other than just
and there's other companies working on various mobile charging solutions. Like you just dropped a link in Slack to sparkcharge.io, which is another one. And there have been various others over the years, and I think we're going to see more of this as there are more EVs out there. You're going to see other. Volkswagen also showed off a concept or announced something that they were working on a few months ago, with a larger battery solution that, could go on a truck, and if you're parked on the street somewhere, it could bring it out and charge you there as well. So there's a lot of different solutions to this.
Well, and it solves so many of the issues that we have, not only that you have already experienced, Sam, but the infrastructure problem, how do you get these things in the right places to where they need to go? That those parking spaces that we just talked about, like you see them all, and sometimes there's a big long line, and sometimes they're absolutely empty. And so the efficiency and the usage and the utilization rates would just be a completely different equation. You also don't have to get municipalities as involved. Also, this solves that issue of the multifamily, the multifamily dwelling problem.
Exactly.
That is so prevalent. And so I think this is absolutely, absolutely genius. I love this.
Yeah. So hopefully,
it's not a bad idea.
yeah, hopefully we'll see this in action within the next couple of years.
Well, and if they've made it easy enough to get the energy back in the cars, then they can make the adoption of the cars a little easier, a little bit more, little bit freer. So
it takes away one of those significant barriers and that feeling of unknown, right? That uncertainty that so many people have with EVs. I'm sure we'll see something like this at CES as well. And some advanced ones coming out.
And this whole area of reducing friction for EV ownership is something that a lot of automakers are working on. This is one of the things that Ford, for example, at the launch of the Mach-E, talked about with what they're doing with Ford Pass, with aggregating multiple charging networks, so you don't have to have accounts with ChargePoint and EVgo and Electrify America and Blink and everybody else. You can have one interface and you just go to an open charger, you plug in, and you get charged for it. And other companies are involved in actually investing in the charging networks. So everybody's trying to fix this problem. It's something that Tesla obviously was very early on with the supercharger network, and they've done a great job with that. Now we need networks that can need to eliminate this friction for everybody else that isn't Tesla.
Yeah, well, I think a good example is look at ATM networks, right? Like you could go across the country and there may be a different sort of ATM network, but your card from the East Coast is going to work on the West Coast. Because there's some national ones as well, and they all figure it out. And there's fees that get sort of passed along, and that you might get charged to use it, but you can still use it.
Yeah, or cell phone roaming's another one.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll figure it out eventually.
Yep.
You mentioned Tesla. We had a few, well, I guess you two, and Rebecca brought it up that you guys have had some questions about the Model 3 deliveries in China that are starting to happen.
Yes. So they're starting, I think on Monday, December 30th, that they're delivering like 30, I think it was.
15.
I thought it was 15 to customers and 15 to employees.
I think those 15 customers are probably employees or friends of Tesla.
Yes, definitely people that are going to be tolerant.
Yeah, people who aren't going to complain about getting a pre-production car.
Yeah, exactly.
So all Teslas were essentially pre-production cars.
Well,
I'm sorry. Let's not do this tonight. My mistake.
So people are excited for Monday. There, we'll leave it at that.
Well, so.
Yeah, so
I guess I hadn't been paying as close attention. Like they got their production facility up and running pretty quickly.
They did.
Is it like are these validation cars or are they?
I think
full production.
I think what they are is complete knockdown kits that they are shipping over from Fremont.
Oh, well, that makes it easier to get the line going.
Yeah. So they're sending over, body shells and battery packs and motors and a bunch of other stuff. And they're just doing the final assembly there.
But they do call them MICs, made in China, Model 3s. I mean, as final assembly.
Yeah. They're just not making any
Do
parts.
you think it helps them understand, make improvements at manufacturing now that they've added another facility and they've got to figure it out again?
Probably not. I mean, if they end up implementing the same processes that they did in Fremont, then they're probably going to have the same kinds of problems. I would be skeptical until I see them make actual real progress on that.
Full sales aren't going to be until they're like June. I think they're targeting full sales. So.
Yeah.
It's just the start. It's the trickle. It always starts with one small flake.
Well, and Tesla has
and there's plenty of flakes in the Tesla community.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, that may have been a bad example.
The hits keep on coming. What's their reputation like in China? Are they because they have a good reputation here in the US.
Well, it's all about potential, right? That's what Tesla's all about. I mean, the potential in China is enormous, as we talked about earlier. It's, the 24 million person market. I mean, China has, they have cities of 7 and 8 million people we've never even heard of. And so, it's the potential is enormous. And that's what Tesla's stock valuation is based off of. That's what everything in Tesla is based off of, is potential.
But so far, Tesla's sales in China have not been enormous, relative to the market size there. They are vastly outsold by local domestic Chinese brands, particularly
I would
BYD.
expect that, yeah.
It's interesting because I did bring that up in my NPR piece earlier today that I had to record about that there's so much more domestic competition that Tesla doesn't necessarily face here in the States, but they certainly would face that in China.
How are they managing the IP issue as well? Like, China has this reputation of being a place where IP theft happens a lot, and Tesla has a lot of proprietary IP.
Well, so far, as I said, they're just shipping it over from the U.S. They're not actually making stuff there. And, to be honest, aside from their motors and their power electronics and the software, most of the rest of what they're doing is not really that innovative. There's nothing about their production processes that is particularly, that I think anybody would want to steal. The way they build body shells, nothing
Tent
particularly.
City, baby.
Yeah, but the motor designs. Fact is, anybody can go and buy a Tesla and tear it down, or just buy the Monroe and Associates tear down report, and you'll get all the information. If you want to steal their IP, that's not that hard to do. The most important thing they've got probably is their control software, and again, that's just because they're building the cars there doesn't they're not necessarily stealing any. It's not going to be any more prone to being stolen than people just buying a car here and pulling the software out of it.
Let's hit some questions and then we'll call it a night. Last week I did see one come in on Twitter when we put out the call. It was just what was our favorite automotive holiday gift? Anything stand out to either of you?
Radar detector.
Excellent.
I have not traditionally given automotive holiday gifts, but if you're looking for something to throw in a stocking, definitely recommend a digital tire pressure gauge. Throw one of those in there. Give one of those to everybody who's got a car. Make sure they stick it in their glove box, and that they use it regularly. Yeah, stuff from Blip Shift is always fun for the enthusiast.
That's true.
Some Blip Shift T-shirts.
Yeah, one of my friends got me like a cargo holder thing that folded flat so that like it's kind of like a pop-up.
Yeah.
One of those black pop-up canvas things that then if you had groceries or something, you could pop it up and put the bags in there and they wouldn't slide around everywhere. That was very practical.
Yep.
It's a good question.
Yeah,
I just don't think we're very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, those are definitely handy. And, my wife's had those in the back of her cars. But I think those are the sorts of things that you usually, you're not going to wait for the holidays for that. You're going to pick one up, when you need it, I guess.
Yeah. My thoughts and my picks are all super practical too. Like, we're just practical people. I was like, winter tires, a small tool set.
Actually, if you're looking for something to give around the holiday times, like a nice compact blanket, to put in the back of the car, if you live in cold weather environments, blanket, some flares,
emergency kit for sure.
An emergency kit, to have, in case you get stuck, and maybe an extra, a battery, phone battery to keep your phone charged, if you get stuck somewhere.
What are some other questions, Sam? You said we had some to our feedback at wheelbearings.media email.
Yes. So let's see. We had an email from Sid Polk. He said, "I was sad you dissed my convertible," referring to the Sebring convertible. I don't even remember talking about the Sebring convertible. It sounds like something you would have dissed, Dan.
I probably did. It's probably me. The Sebring convertible is not a good. If you enjoy it, more power to you.
Yeah, I think if you're referring to the last generation of the Sebring convertible from the mid 2000s, from like about 2000, what, 7 or so, 2008.
Something. Yeah.
The
Didn't
one that
Scott
was based.
Burgess basically lose his job over that?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
he
did.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the one that you could get as either a soft top or a retractable hard top. That one was bad. It was badly done. The 97, the first generation Sebring convertible, actually wasn't a bad car, especially for the time.
Oh, no, the JX was amazing.
Yeah, that one was actually pretty decent. So if you took offense, said we're sorry, we didn't mean to offend you. That particular generation of the Sebring convertible actually was a decent car, and that one was
Also,
around for a while.
Let's not die on this hill. If you enjoy it, man,
Yeah,
enjoy it.
yeah.
It's a convertible.
Don't listen to us. I mean, if you like something, whatever you like is great for you. I mean, there's stuff that I like that Dan doesn't like and Rebecca doesn't like, and that's too bad.
I don't like anything.
Yeah, well, so okay. What else we got here? Rick Thwaitt wrote in to tell us he's been a longtime listener since the Autoblog days. He's the guy with the Suzuki Joy Pop K van. Ooh, yes, the Japanese K cars.
That's
these
awesome.
are the little 660cc vehicles, and these little tiny vans are just hysterical. If you ever visit Japan, seeing these things rolling around is pretty amazing. So it sounds like he brought one over. He's also got a 17 Mazda 6 Grand Touring, and his wife drives a 17 CX-5 Grand Touring that she bought on our recommendation. Well,
they sound like our kind of people.
Yeah. Okay. William Charles wrote in to let us know that he's got an Audi A7 TDI, Porsche 911S, and a Sprinter 4x4 van RV conversion. And he's in Florida. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay.
I bet the Sprinter gets the most use out of all of them.
So this one's from Vanessa Pinter, and she's in Colorado, and she's a relatively new listener. Came to the show from my appearances on Leo Laporte's Twit network, his podcast network, and likes Rebecca's perspective. And she's
Thank you very much.
Definitely.
I do as well.
Yeah.
I do.
Thank you very much.
Particularly like the perspective that she can identify with, which is being of lesser physical stature. Those are my words.
Again, me too.
He does sometimes have trouble hearing Dan. Maybe y'all can buy him a new mic someday, or at least raise his volume a bunch.
Oh, that's good. That's good to know.
Okay.
I'll fix it in the mix.
Yeah.
That is helpful.
Yeah. Let's see. She drives a Prius. Her husband has a Volt, and hope their next car will be a full EV. But really disappointed at how badly this 2014 Prius handles in general and drives in the snow. And maybe worse than my previous Prius, or maybe the snow is getting higher. Want an electric car big enough for 2 dogs and high enough to get over the darn piles of snow left at every side street by the plow. Well, that's a problem no matter
Audi
what kind
e-tron?
of car you drive. The e-tron's not that tall, like, for getting through those big piles of snow, like when the plows go by and you leave a big bank of snow at the end of your driveway.
Yeah, I get that.
That's where you need something like a Jeep. But let's see what else.
Or what about that Rivian? We didn't talk about the Rivian tank mode.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That thing's awesome.
Yeah,
those things are going to be pricey
the tank
too, though.
turn.
Let's see.
Yeah, they're going to be.
She's intrigued by these minivans, but the gas mileage is appalling. Well, if you're interested in minivans and you don't want bad gas mileage, definitely take a look at the Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid. That plug-in hybrid, it's got fantastic mileage. Let's see.
It's a nice van too. It's I think if you're driving a Prius and a Prius and a Volt, if you get into that Pacifica, it's going to feel a little bit more premium.
Right.
I think.
That Prius is the 2014 is the previous generation Prius, which, yes, it was not a good handling car, that old generation of Prius.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The new one is much better. For what they're looking for an EV, what is there out there that would be
I was going to say, isn't there a RAV4 that's maybe not full EV, but there's definitely
there's a RAV4. There's a RAV4 hybrid. There's also a plug-in hybrid that's coming next summer. The Ford Escape hybrid or plug-in hybrid is coming in the spring. So both of those are plug-ins. There's also a hybrid version of CRV coming early in the year. So those are all options. But if if you really want to get through that darn pile of snow that left by the plow, if you can afford it, something like the Rivian or the upcoming Ford F-150 EV might be options for you there. The Rivian might, if you're something like an SUV, sounds like might be more up your alley, and so that's something to consider. I mean, those are going to start somewhere in the probably $60,000 to $70,000 range, so they're not cheap. But as four-wheel drive utility, electric vehicles go, that may be your best option in the near term.
If you're looking for something cheap, we were talking about Mitsubishi. You can get yourself an Outlander PHEV that will be really cheap, and you won't care about it rusting away to nothing.
That's true,
because you'll get your money out of it.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not a terrible hybrid. I didn't mind it at all.
So it's not. It's quite interested in new electrics, but you probably look for a 3-year-old something in a couple of years. What
about the Volvo XC90?
The XC90 plug-in is pretty good. The electric driving range is not enormous. It's only like 14, 15 miles.
But it has higher ground clearance, though.
Yeah, it is good for that.
And it's a beautiful vehicle.
Yeah. But if you're looking in that price range, there's also other options there as well. There's the Audi Q5 plug-in hybrid,
the X5,
the X5, the BMW X5, there's Range Rover plug-in hybrids now. So I don't know.
Jesus, there's a Range Rover plug-in hybrid.
Yeah.
That just seems like the worst idea ever.
Yeah.
An electric Range Rover.
Well, and you got electric Jaguars, fully electric Jaguars.
I know. That's
so.
Oh, actually, and the I-Pace actually might be a really good.
The I-Pace, the I-Pace, the range is actually getting better. They've introduced a range improvement for that that's coming for 2020. They've already launched it in Europe. There's also you mentioned the Audi e-tron, Rebecca, and there's the e-tron Sportback that's coming next year.
Yeah, that looks cool.
So within the next couple of years, there's actually going to be a lot more options available. So if you can hold off a bit, that's actually probably the best thing to do right now. And
I think I'd like to know a little bit more about sort of where.
Yeah, what's your budget range?
Yeah, hit us back with what do you like? What do you need in a vehicle? What's your price range?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And one final note here, Vanessa says, let Rebecca know that she wishes your mother good health and best wishes and condolences on the situation.
That's so sweet. That's so sweet. She's doing much better. Thank you. That's very sweet.
We have the best listeners.
We do. They're awesome.
Let's see. Podcast. Love the podcast. Even Dan really liking Rebecca's input. I'm from Lincoln, California, and drive a 2016 BMW M235i and a Volvo XC40. Nice choices.
Nice.
Question.
Those are good choices.
Right now, SUVs are it. What body style will be the next it?
Wagons.
Hatchbacks.
Yeah, wagons or hatchbacks. Yeah.
I think
wagons are going to
discreet hatchbacks.
Do you think wagons will ever make a comeback? I hope so, but I doubt it.
I think Rebecca's probably more right with the hatchbacks. Yeah. Being more discreet like that. So because it's so much easier now to go from everything has that swoopy roofline, and you just make the whole back of it open up, and it becomes more practical. Wagons is a little bit more niche, and weirdos like us like them, but I think it's a little harder sell. But you've got a whole generation that was reared in not only minivans, because because people my age were sort of reared in minivans. A lot of people had minivans the first couple of generations, but SUVs.
Absolutely.
And so there's going to be that reaction that goes from SUVs to something else, and that's coming. And I don't know.
Well, I think we're starting to see some of that now with like some of this new generation of crossovers that are kind of shifting back to being a little more car-like. Like the new Escape, the CX-30, that are, they have some of that extra height of utilities, but they're getting more of the car type of characteristics than utilities and crossovers have had for a while.
Yeah.
And then one last one here from Abby Beckert, who we had responded to previously about utes and trucks in Australia. And want to make a couple of points here. Car-based pickups are gone in Australia, so things like the Holden Utes and the Ford Falcon Utes, like the El Camino style pickups. Those are no longer in production and not available anywhere anymore. Dual cab Utes are the main market. These are crew cab pickup trucks. And one of the so this is like the mid-size pickups mostly, like the Tacomas and Rangers and that sort of thing. And Abby drives a diesel Nissan Navara D40, which is basically the Nissan Frontier, but heavily modified for off-road with 33-inch tires, a suspension lift, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice.
Main vehicles are my partner's Mazda 3 and a 250cc motorbike that they use for commuting. The Mazda is for camping and long trips, as in 3 months on the road. Or the Nissan is for camping and long trips, as in 3 months on the road. You mentioned renting a truck when you need one. We did the math on that. $21,000 to rent a truck for 3 months. So, yeah. When we talked about renting, when we mentioned renting a truck, we were thinking of like a weekend, or just a couple of days. If you need to tow your boat from your driveway to the lake and put it in the lake, and then to do that again in the fall to take it out. If you're going to be driving a vehicle like this for an extended period of time, then go ahead and buy one. That it makes no sense to rent it for 3 months.
That's not really what we were talking about.
We're talking short term. A couple of days, a couple $100 to rent one of these. So thank you for all those. There were also a couple of things that came in on Twitter today. Let's see, where was it here? Oh, Tim Martin responded to Dan's call here. Any thoughts on the pros and cons of a 2-year-old plug-in hybrid versus a 4-year-old Model S or Bolt? Mainly looking at Clarity and Volt as options. So that's the Honda Clarity and the Chevy Volt. Typical usage of 10 miles round-trip commute with occasional 350-mile trip to family. Budget of $25 to $30K. So, in that situation, I don't know what you guys think. If you're mainly, if you got a 10-mile round-trip commute, a plug-in hybrid's actually a great option. And then you don't have any hassle when you do have that long trip.
I like the plug-in
Rebecca,
hybrid.
What do you think? Yeah.
I mean, I like the plug-in hybrid a lot. I think that 2-year-old, I'd rather have him in the 2-year-old Honda Clarity because that's a really good technology and it's new and modern technology versus a 4-year-old Tesla. But not because it's the Tesla, but just because the Clarity is new. And I remember driving it when it first came out, and I like the Clarity a lot.
I would never buy a used Tesla or a new one at this point until they get their production stuff. And it's not because I don't like the cars. Again, I'm impressed by the cars. I'm not impressed by their reliability or durability. And some have been very good. The Model S seems to have a lot of its quirks worked out, but I have pause with that. Like that's a real commitment.
On the other hand, I mean, if any other EV aside from a Tesla, like a Bolt or a Nissan
I was
Leaf.
Say, yeah, the Bolt sounds fine to me. A Leaf, absolutely.
If you were to get a 3 to 4 year old one of those, particularly if with the Bolt, and I would say a 3-year-old Leaf, like the second generation Leaf, you can get some screaming deals on those because depreciation on EVs tends to be very high. And so you can actually typically get a really good deal on a used one. And, so those are actually a really good option. And, as long as you get the second generation Leaf, with 150 mile range, depending, what I would do is, take a look at what your charging options are on that 350 mile trip. If there are, CHAdeMO chargers or other DC fast chargers along the way, so that you can make that trip, then that might be actually the most economical option for you. Otherwise, the plug-in might be the best option.
I was
going to say, go ahead.
I wanted to know what kind of mileage degradation they can expect in that range from a 2 or 3-year-old battery.
In that time, it should be pretty minimal, like probably no more than 3 or 4%. So
Okay, so that's a lot less than what it had been in the past.
Yeah, no, the batteries are actually holding up pretty well. The manufacturers have done a good job on trying to be fairly conservative with the use of the battery. To make, they're trying to guarantee the durability. And these things, they have 8-year, 100,000-mile warranties on them, or if you're in California, it's a 10-year, 150,000-mile warranty on the battery. So, they should hold up fairly well.
And that's transferable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. See, if it's one car that's going to have to do that occasional 300, if it's a 350-mile round trip to family, so it sounds like it's probably a consistent route. So if you know what your charging is and you plan ahead, and you want to go full EV, you probably can. And of those options, like I think the Bolt is fine, and like we mentioned, the Leaf. I do like the Volt too, but I think the Clarity is probably like you said, Rebecca. It's newer technology, and it's probably, I think it's probably a little roomier.
Oh, the Clarity's much roomier than the Volt
for sure.
It's a little harder on the eyes, but it's definitely much more practical.
Terrible. Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Okay. It does look weird. It's like a weird cross between a 70s Buick and a Honda.
Well, the tire and the tire covers are really bad on it.
Yeah. But you know what? I would drive that to save fuel and CO2 emissions and stuff. Like whatever. I'm old enough. I don't care what I look like on the road. So I can't see it anymore.
And I'm pretty sure you're the youngest of the three of us, so that's scary.
I'm an old soul.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, Dan was born old.
Yeah.
That's true. I'm growing into it. I got another 40 years before I finally hit my peak. Okay,
right,
that's
it for this week, I think. We're at almost 2 hours, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean,
So much are compact. Always a goal.
Okay. This is what happens when we do them on weekends, right? Like we ramble.
Yes.
So you get the benefit of that, listeners. Covers 2 days worth of commuting. If you want to have us answer your questions or attempt to, you can hit us. It's feedback@wheelbearings.media. We're on Twitter and all of the other places, so you know where to find us. And thanks for listening.
See you next time.
And Happy New Year.